Welcome back to the last couple of sessions for today. And to round up the previous discussions about funding, we are now going to touch on the topic of government funds. And for that, I would like to invite Andrei Olaru, who is part of the RGDA board, to tell us more about that.
Hello. Okay, this works. It's a bit loud. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk a bit about, I know, I have this. We're going to talk a bit about accessing state funds. Before we get into it, I would like to know, who am I talking to? So, in that sense, I'm curious. How many of you are currently in the active process of trying to make your own game? Okay, fair amount. How many of you would like to do that? So maybe you're not doing it right now, but you'd like to do it. Okay. How many of you are people actively, I don't know, involved in public affairs or stuff like that? Okay, cool. So at least I know who I'm talking to. Okay. Because this talk will be about accessing state funds in Romania in particular. So if you're trying to do this in another country, this will not apply as much. And it is about accessing state funds to make video games. Now, a bit about who am I and what recommends me to give this advice. I've started my adult life in the field of academic competitive debating, where I learned to talk about all sorts of stuff that I know nothing about with confidence. So prepare. But afterwards, I ran an indie studio called Critique Gaming for about 6 years. We were about 10 to 12 people. We made free games, PC console, and I had to pay salaries to these people. And we weren't extremely commercially successful, so the salaries had to come from someone. So I got grants. I applied to a lot of grants. I got grants in a total value of about 500K. This means both Creative Europe grants, but also grants from the local national government. This would be like the Startup Nation funds. I got money from the Ministry of Education for the internationalization program. I got even an AFCN, the National Cultural Fund grant. And I also applied to all sorts of other grants that I did not get. So not 100% success rating. This is how it goes. But the point is that I spent quite a lot of time applying. Huh? Oh, better? Okay. Quite a lot of time applying to grants. So I have some insight into this. So the main question that we will explore before we explore how to get grants would be, why would you get grants? This is a picture of me when I was very young, but I was already a reader. But I plowed over a lot of text, and this is what getting grants involves. Sometimes you plow over a lot of text. But why the work and the hassle? And the simple question to this is because you want money. You want money, and grants are one way of getting it when you do not yet have a thing that you can prove will sell. And there are two reasons, thus, for which you may do it. One is if you're already a studio, so you are a team, you're already making a game, you do have the money to make that game, but you may want to not spend your money and spend the state's money, which is always a great thing to do. Or if you're a hobbyist, so someone that is not already making their living out of making games for themselves. So you're not a professional in making games for yourself, and you want to make steps towards becoming that type of professional, towards becoming someone that can make money out of games that you're selling yourself. And I think that even though obviously for the first category, grants can be very useful, they're primarily useful for the second category. And that is because in our industry, of course, if you have a great prototype, you can go to a publisher, you can show it to them and be like, look, this is going to sell millions. And they're going to be like, yeah, this is going to sell millions. How much money do you need? 1 million, okay, here, have it. 500K, okay, here, have it. But the question then is, how do you get to make the prototype? And here's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because usually in order for you to make money enough to make a video game, you need to have a prototype. But how do you get the money to make the prototype? Which costs around 200K, honestly. If you're going to make a game that will be able to impress a publisher, that's kind of how much it's going to cost you. Maybe you are super smart and talented and you can do it all on your own. Think then how much your salary would cost a big corporation. And then multiply it by the amount of months you would work on that prototype, you're going to get to about 200K. There are very few games that are so innovative that they can output a good prototype on a total production value of less than 200K. I don't know, maybe Baba Is You would be an example in that sense, but that guy just had a small genius moment there. But for most of us, regular human beings, we need to get this amount of money. How can you get them? Here are some options available. So in Europe, Romania is in Europe. The first thing you can access is the Creative Europe Video Games call. So they're going to give you about 200K with a 40% co-funding. This means that besides the 200K that they give you, you need to also come up with another 130K. Or they could give you less and you would have to come up with less, but that's the ratio. So 60% them, 40% you. So this is one option. You can access some other European calls from the EU Commission, especially in the Creative Europe branch. So there's, for example, one about making games together with another studio from another country. There's another one about making a bigger game with free studios. There's another one about making free tiny games. There are all sorts of calls. Many of them are not so suitable for making an indie game as the video games call, which is very suitable for that. If you're making a game that also does something else other than being an entertainment product, maybe you're researching something through the game, then maybe you do qualify for a Horizon grant or an EIT grant. Those usually do not require co-financing or a much lower co-financing. But then you're not just making a game that you're about to sell on Steam, you're also doing something else. So, I don't know, maybe you're making a serious game that has some therapeutic or educational purpose. On the topic of education, there's also Erasmus money, which is another branch of the type of institutions that the Commission runs that offers you money, and there are calls over there for making this type of things as well. If you go on the webpage of EGDF, that is the European Games Developers Federation, you will get, first of all, a summary of all EU video game industry funding calls for 2024 to 2025. So you don't need to remember any of these. They are very available, and it's very easy to read for that. Many of them, because we're at the middle of 2025, have already been are done, but most likely there will be a similar call next year. Also, on the EGDF page, you can find another big list of various cultural state aid for video game production throughout Europe. This might be useful. Maybe you will want to incorporate in a different country other than Romania and try to make a game there, or maybe even move there. So keep it in mind, honestly. Indie video game development is about hustling. This is changing geographies is one type of hustling that you can do. But a main issue with many of these is the fact that you do need co-financing. So if you already are a studio that has some money and you're just cutting, let's say, the cost of making, then you're going to be okay. But if you're not, how are you going to get the co-financing money? Now, you can apply, obviously, to investors, and that's an option. But to be honest, video games are a very risky business. There are very few investors out there that are willing to put in that amount of money unless they trust you as a creator a lot. So maybe they know you, then they know that you're very talented. They are willing to give and invest into you. Then good for you. But what do you do if you are not in that position? Most people in most of Europe, what they do is that they co-finance a European grant with a local grant. For example, Germany has the video game funds. In France, you have the CNC that has a number of calls about video games. What are the Romanian options? So, first of all, you have the AFCN, the Administrația Fondului Cultural Național. They have two calls every year, one in spring, one in autumn. One of the sections is called new media. So they bundle up over there anything that is not full feature film. So there are people that apply with short films. There are people that apply with podcasts. You can try to apply with a video game. You need to prove for AFCN the cultural value of that product that you're making. That's not going to be easy, but you can try. And you can get about 50K, or if you apply for a multi-year, let's say, project, you can get about 100K. So if you really play your cards right, you can co-finance with AFCN, one of those grants from Creative Europe, and make a bundle of about, I don't know, 250K, which would be over the 200K mark that you'd need to make a prototype. There's also regional program funds for digitalization or innovation. So if you're in Bucharest, you would go on the website of the Ilfov agency. If you're in another region, you'd go on their websites. They have their own calls over there. Those for innovation in particular can be used for paying salaries for developing new innovative products. And a video game does fit their description. In previous years, you also had the Startup Nation program. I don't know if they're going to do it anymore, to be perfectly honest. But if you're starting a new company, this was a way of being able to access about 50K. So let's say you have all these options and you're committed. You're saying, okay, you know what? I want to become a professional, not just a hobbyist that does a little game in my spare time. I want to be able to pay myself. I want to be able to hire another 2 people and pay them as well. We're going to make a game. What to do now? What to do now if you're already decided to apply? Many things that most people, their first thought about this is, okay, I will just go and get a consultant, and the consultant will write the thing for me, and I'm going to give them a bit of money, and everything will be fine. I personally believe that is a mistake. You do not need consultants. Not only that you do not need them, but they are actually going to hurt your chances. Because even if it might seem like there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of reading and writing of stuff, applying to grants is not a bureaucratic process. You need to treat it as creative work. And this is a nice picture that I once took at the seaside. It's one of my little creations. You need to treat it as creative work. What does this mean? So first of all, you need to research all options. This means that you need to go on these websites, see what are the calls available, read carefully a lot of things. For example, how much money are they giving you? What's the co-financing rate? Are you eligible? Is the company that you have or you could set up legally eligible? Are the activities that you want to do legally eligible? Is the application date far enough into the future so that you can output a good application until then? To a large extent, then, let's say that you find a decently good shot at it. Why do you need to treat it as creative work? Because maybe you have in mind the game that you want to make. But chances are that the game you want to make, in its very raw form or in the format that is in your brain at that point, is not going to cut it. You need to adapt and expand your plans to fit their objectives. So for all of these grants, they're going to ask you in a lot of detail a lot of detail. What are you going to do with the money? What are you going to make? What is the exact game that you're going to make? And we know amongst ourselves that usually it's a very iterative process. You need to constantly try out stuff. But that's not how grant applications work. You need to tell them exactly the game you're going to make, and much more clear than you have it in your mind. Even more, maybe you're going to need to prove that it ticks all sorts of objectives or priorities that the institution that's giving you the grant has. Okay, this means that, first of all, you may need to change some things to the game that you're making so that they give you the money. But second of all, you need to create arguments. And that's very creative work. You need to create arguments why this particular thing that you are making will reach their particular objectives. And you need to treat this seriously. So for example, in my experience, a Creative Europe application is about 70 pages long, and on top of that, you add the GDD that has mock-ups of the game, ideally in engine, that describes in detail the entire script of the game with all of its branchiness, that describes in detail all of the mechanics of the game to the extent to which you, I don't know, would more to a higher extent than you would show, for example, a publisher. And you need to have all that ready. So there's a lot of work there. But on the other hand, if you think about it, if you put in 2 months of work, of hard work, and then you get 200K, then it's essentially like getting paid 100K for a month of work. So it kind of makes sense. It's not really that bad of an investment of your time. But the reality then is that for many of these grants, there's a large competition. So for example, for Creative Europe, there's only 7.5 million. Last year, even though the threshold for becoming eligible is 75 points out of 100 in their markings, only things that had above 80 points. And it's really hard to get 80 points. Only things that had above 80 points got funded, because there's a lot of competition. So in reality, what happens is that the first time you apply to a grant, most likely you will fail. But then you get to try again and again, because in reality, writing grants is a skill in itself. And as I said, it's not a skill that a consultant could have, because a consultant does not know what you're making. It's a process of at the same time doing game design, whilst also doing argumentative work, whilst also doing bureaucracy, and the three cannot be unentangled. So a consultant may, I know, give you some pointers, but you're going to pay a lot of money for those pointers that you could just get by just sending an email to the Creative Europe office or to whatever office of the institution that's giving you that grant and asking them questions. But because it's a skill that you can hone. You can get better and better and better at writing these grants. You can build. So for example, if sometimes there are passages that you write that you can then use in a different grant application. And in time, if you persevere, you will most probably and apply yourself to the same level of, let's say, creativity that you do apply yourself when you're trying to make a game that makes money in this industry of ours, which is anyway not very easy. You're probably going to be able to get that grant. And this is sort of what I'm advising you. I'm advising you to try it out. It's an interesting experience. It's a hard experience that will challenge you in a good way. And you may actually get to live your dream of making your own game professionally. And now I have 6 minutes and 50 seconds left for questions.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Let's see. Okay, we have someone here.
Hello, thank you for the insightful presentation. My question is there any limit or are there any mechanisms in place to avoid people applying to multiple grants at once, either in the regional or in the European space? Because you only kind of mentioned bundling when you take one regional and then use that as a starting point for a European one.
So there are. So first of all, it depends. It depends. And for example, for Creative Europe, they will ask you, have you applied with this particular project to more than one grant in the same stage, let's say? And if you say yes, then you're ineligible. So for example, you'd have the video game grant, and then you'd have the international partnership grant. That's both. Both of them are under Creative Europe. You can't apply to both of them with the same thing. So this is one example. And there might be similar incompatibilities between national grants, but there are also compatibilities. So you kind of have to explore this to a certain extent. And usually these are more rather present for smaller companies because, for example, if you have a big company and you're trying out something very interesting and for a Horizon grant, usually all of these are compatible.
Okay.
Hey, so what's your experience actually getting paid, like in terms of delays and turnarounds and actual management work that you need to access the funds once they've been granted? Has that always been smooth? Are there any tips that you have for people?
So the Creative Europe office is great. They're really great. There might be some bureaucracy that you did wrongly. They will just write you an email. You're going to hop on a call on Teams with them. They're going to explain what things you need to change, and then you're going to change them. And they usually send the money exactly on the day in which they tell you that they're going to send the money. So they're great. In terms of the Romanian state, they're not that great. They're honestly pretty dreadful. They delay their own schedules by months. So yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I have seen some previous one, and it was good too, regarding the fundings from you. Regarding the cultural funds, what should we prove to them? Like, should our game be related to Romanian history, or is it, or are we able to
AFCN?
Yes,
Fund?
yes.
So, from what I remember, usually it's about proving cultural impact. So first of all, they will ask, for them, they will ask you what's the problem, as if there's a problem that you're trying to solve, which is a bit weird. But they're going to ask you, what's the problem? What's the sort of a gap in the cultural landscape that you are trying to fix? This is the language that you're going to have to use. It's going to be very weird. You're going to have to do a lot of argumentative, let's say, gymnastics. And you're going to have to prove cultural sort of impact.
So it shouldn't be directly related to, I don't know, to something like, I don't know, Dacians or something.
No, but for example, if you could make an argument that, look, this is this aspect of Romanian history that is not explored in an interactive manner in any way, in any form of new media, and this is the gap that we're fitting. But you can find whatever thing you want to try to argue as being a problem that you're solving. You don't necessarily need to be very in love with Burebista.
All right. Maybe one more question, if anyone. Okay, there we go.
Hi, and thanks. A very hypey presentation. I was wondering if you can speak more about the Horizon programs or Erasmus where if you're, for example, involving research in your game project, like if you know more about that, like
Yeah,
can you be a student or like can you be doing research on games and pursue this and
if you are an educational institution and you're trying to provide some form of education through games or through a game, you could try to apply to an Erasmus grant. Beware, they're not that much. Like, they don't give you that much money. In terms of Horizon, they give you a ton of money. most Horizon grants are over 10 million. But for that, you need to prove like you're really on the edge of, let's say, technological or scientific research. You're doing something that will create essentially a new technology. They have some brackets of what it means. You need to be at least a T5 out of the whole T1 to T8 of a technology. So chances are, if you're creating a game engine, you could apply for a Horizon. But if you're making a game, most probably you won't.
And I will just to close off. We intend to organize an online webinar that gets into more practical detail about accessing government funds, which Andrei will host. So stay tuned for
Thursday at 1.
There we go.
Thursday at 1. If you want to know more, Thursday at 1.
We'll.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you, Andrei, once again.
Thank you as well.